When we finished yesterday's video, Website Wednesday,
You did.
you guys mentioned that you wanted to do something, and you said you wanted to interview somebody.
Yes.
And I said, okay, great. Let me know who to invite. I'll send them the link, blah, blah, blah. We'll get them on Restream, whatever. And then they said, no, we'd actually like to interview you.
That's right.
And there's
Yes.
Dr. V, who I think came up with this and
Yes.
seems way too enthusiastic about this.
I am so enthusiastic.
So let me just, in case you've ever seen any of our videos before, let me just frame this up for you, okay? John and Dr. V have known each other for a long time. They do a lot of work together. And then I knew John through a third party, and we never actually worked together, but we had some nice conversations over the years. But that was it.
Yeah.
We were just acquaintances. And then we ended up sort of doing this, and we invited Chris, Dr. V, to come on once we'd done X number of videos. But those guys know each other really well.
We do.
But the same level of knowledge and experience doesn't exist between either of them and me.
Well, that's not totally true.
Well, we've never worked on a project or that kind of stuff. I assume you guys know each other a lot better than I know or you guys know.
Yeah.
But it's not a level of friendliness. It's just that, you guys have your own sort of business interest stuff, and we have mine. Unfortunately, we're adjacent in enough stuff that things are interesting.
Right.
But somehow, 70-something videos in, it had never occurred to, certainly not to me. And these guys are good for that stuff. They'll come up with stuff that I had not thought of before. Is why don't we, ask you some questions that are on our mind? And I said, well, why not? Who cares? Go for it. Caution to the wind.
Wow.
And so
It does seem so atypical, Dean.
I know, right? But it's been an incredibly crazy week. Our 90-minute long LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live thing last week about positioning and messaging and stuff. Well, I mean, a lot of work went into that, and then we did it. It's been a crazy week since then, with so many people following up with me and, wanting to explore it more and doing stuff and meeting so many new people. It's been great meeting so many of you who saw that and then reached out to me. We had our, a quick little chat, and all. It was fantastic. And it's been a week of, it's been super, super globally busy with me working incredibly weird hours all week long, sleeping, if I can sleep, very weird hours. And so it just seems like, let's go. Let's do it. If you're ever going to pick a week to do this, this is the week, because whatever. Let's go.
That's right.
Whatever.
The week's not going to get any weirder than it has been right up until this moment. So you guys go right ahead.
In terms of personal branding, the more we know about a person and their personality and some of their background, the more connections we can actually make with you, as well as you can make with your audience of.
Sure.
John, why don't you start?
That's the hypothesis anyway. We'll see if it works.
That is the hypothesis, the working hypothesis.
Well, why don't we start with the elephant in the room? What got you into copywriting? What got you interested in it, and to the level that you're in it today?
I grew up when I was a kid, up until the time I was about 15. The only job I remember him having, and he had it, I think, the entire time, or pretty much the entire time, my dad had, was the manager of a little bookstore. I grew up in a really small town. My town had 800 people on the east coast of Canada, the island of Newfoundland. You couldn't get further east and still be in North America than where we grew up. We didn't even get mail. We had to go to another town a few miles away that had 2,000 people in it, and they had a post office.
By boat or car?
By car.
Okay.
But, it's not like you didn't go out to the front of the street and grab your mail like I do here in my neighborhood in America. This just wasn't a thing, right?
Yeah.
It was like a trip to go get just your mail. I mean, there's nothing else down there to do. There was no mall or coffee shop or anything. You just drove to that town to get your mail and drove home. It was crazy. But my dad was the manager of the bookstore, and we were allowed to read anything in the bookstore as long as we didn't break the spine or otherwise damage the book so that it couldn't be sold.
That makes sense.
Right? And honestly, to this day, I still don't think I've ever broken the spine on a book.
It's good.
It's just a legacy copy paste artifact of my upbringing.
My
And so
legacy
I
is
would read
fixing-
everything.
fixing spines as opposed to breaking spines.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I would read everything. They'd go down into the little lunchroom, and I'd get from the little vending machine. And it was a very small store. Like if you're thinking it was a Barnes and Noble, no, it was like an eighth of the size of a Barnes and Noble. Okay. And there's no coffee shop or anything in there. That's not what bookstores were like back then. But I would get a little soft drink from the machine. My dad would give me like a quarter or something. I'd get a little bar or something. And then I would go down there and, down in the storage area of the store, because obviously I wasn't doing it. It would look weird for like a little kid to be reading adult books. I mean, books aimed at adults. There was no like pornography or anything in this store.
It was not an adult bookstore.
In case my dad ever watches one of these, he says, "What the hell?" So I would go down to the little storage, basically in a library, you'd call it the stacks, but in a bookstore, it's just a storage area with boxes and some books on shelves and stuff. And I would just sit there in this little footstool and I would read everything. I remember reading The Prophet by Gahil Gibran. I remember reading like how Micker on checks worked, the magnetic ink that makes, checks possible when you're writing a check and banking and all that stuff. And I would have been like, I don't know, 9 or 10 when I read about checks. There was books about business models. There was all kinds. I mean, there's a general interest bookstores. There's anything you could think of. There was a book about it. And one day I came across a book on copywriting, and it was a mind bender for me. And it was very like kind of a cut and dried book, but just coming away from the concept of it, that you could write something that would get somebody to do something even years after you wrote it was, such. It's an overused cliche, and I hate cliches. So it was such like a shift in paradigm, a shift in thinking, that something like that was, and that people made a living doing that. That the next year, my parents bought like the little grocery store in our town, and all of a sudden, I had copywriting opportunities. They needed signs made, like phrasing, they had all kinds of stuff done, and that's how I actually got started in copywriting. As I was writing for my parents' businesses.
Great. How old were you when this when you had the copywriting revelation?
I was probably like 11 or 12, and then when I was 14 is when they bought the store.
Yeah. Did you read all the labels on the products in the grocery store?
Oh, I was one of those kids. I have we don't go into it very much, and I'm not going to go into it, but I have like a particular brain wiring that about 2.5% of the population seems to have. And I was one of those people. Like I count everything. I once had a job during college, basically because like my girlfriend, his family owned the business, but it was like basically it was like selling ice cream, but instead of a truck, it was like a bike. You just did it for like a few months over the summer.
Oh, cool.
And I had to come up with a habit that I still have today of I scramble license plate numbers. So if my eyes happen to fall upon someone else's license plate number, I scramble it in my head right away on purpose, because otherwise I'll remember it for a really long time or forever. And it's completely useless information. But if I know I scrambled it, then I don't remember even the scrambled version, because I know it's not accurate and not worth remembering, and it just sort of comes out of my head. But
that's cool. Scrambled plates.
I can remember one time we all went out to buy like I think sandwiches. I think it was like Subway. Subway had just come to our area, and there's a group of us friends in line, 4 or 5 of them, and we all just like one by one, and then they sort of then they would call out your receipt number, and that's you give them your name to say, okay, receipt number, blah blah blah, and you'd go up and your sandwich and meal was ready, kind of thing, right? And months and months later, I was in university, and one of the sort of like hangout rooms that you have there, and one of the people who was in that group from months earlier had decided she was going to clean out her little, I think women call it their wallet, right? Like the little one that sort of like opens almost like a V, and and she said, "Hey, look, this is from that meal." And I said, 452. I said, 452. And she said, "No, it came to $9.87. I said, "No, the receipt number is 452. So much stupid stuff. My wife says that my brain is like the Roach Motel for trivia. Like it checks in and it never checks out.
Checks out.
As a copywriter, it's fantastically useful because I have a very enormous library of sayings and concepts and stuff, and it's all just sort of like stored in there. and I'll read something and say, oh, I know, I heard that on a podcast from 4 years ago where someone made an offhand comment, and that concept would fit perfectly here, and it works out great.
Cool. Mine is only numbers. I can do that, but it's only numbers.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I know what you mean by that. So what was your first entrepreneurial activity? Your first thing that got you started?
One Christmas, my parents gave me like a shrunk down version of a boombox, I think you'd call it today. It wasn't like the same shape as a boombox, but it had a handle and stuff. Yeah, okay. And it had a radio in it and a cassette option. And I would record songs from the radio. This is back in the day, right? And then I would write out the lyrics and sell the lyrics to people. I was in elementary school. Wait, no, I think I was in first year of middle school. It's like 7th grade.
Oh, interesting.
And I would charge them like $1.
Yeah.
So they could sing along to their favorite songs.
Wow.
Huh?
That's very innovative.
Yeah, it's very labor intensive, but you get to sell the same song over and over for a while until people just start sharing it.
Right.
Also, it's a massive copyright violation. But hey, I was in 7th grade. I don't think I was going to end up in jail. So.
Well, plus, would Canadian law have caught up with you if it was from ASCA? I guess.
And most of those songs are from America. Canada doesn't care what happens to American songs.
They don't care.
So yeah, that was my first ever venture of making money.
That's great. So then did you put things on the back burner when you got into the workforce? I mean, you've had different jobs. What spectrum of jobs have you had?
I was a software developer. Essentially, at the same time that the copywriting thing started with my parents' store, I also, a few months prior to that, got my first computer. In fact, back then, there were only like a few of us that had computers. I mean, it was a pretty poor area of North America, first of all. But secondly, it was like, that time. So, I mean, my computer had to be hooked up to a TV. So you'd have like a monitor, that kind of thing, right? And so at the same time, both of those things happened. All three of those things happened. We moved so that we could own that store, and the copywriting started, and my first computer. And so I started like writing code. And so for my whole life and my whole career, I've been in tech and writing code or running big software projects or whatever. And at the same time, I've usually have something on the side where I would do copywriting or speech writing or webinar writing for people, various clients. But it was always sort of, hey, I heard about you, so-and-so, who did so-and-so. That's actually how John met. Like someone that I was helping someone do a webinar, not even writing for him, just sort of helping him. And he got me from another group, and that got me from another group. And that is just sort of get passed along. But I'd have like 1 or 2 clients per quarter maximum. It's only in the last 2 years that I've been doing this full time.
So what was your first computer?
It was it was a TI 99-4A.
Oh.
Texas Instruments 4999/4A.
You got an Apple IIc.
Yeah, you were one of the rich kids.
Yep.
Your dad was a doctor, not the manager of a small bookstore.
Chiropractor charged people $2.50 an adjustment. Yeah, we were rich. So.
But yeah, that was my first computer. And then my second one was a Commodore Amiga, I think, or Commodore 64. No, I think I never had the 64. I think we started at the Commodore 128. Fancy.
Yes.
Were you self-taught in coding, or did you take
classes
in school?
No, I was 14. There were no classes for 14-year-olds. There were no computer classes where I grew up, man. That just wasn't a thing. So yeah, no, I would use magazines and books. And with magazines and books and not having the internet is that if there's a mistake in the printing, you're like on your own to figure out why your code won't compile and run. All right. You always want to get at least the second edition so that they could, like, in the back show the errata. Okay. Sorry, but on this page, on this line, there should have been a, semicolon, not a colon or whatever.
So were you a good student in school, or nerdy, or just sort of on your own?
I never liked how things are organized, even to this day. I always want to reorganize or optimize any kind of system I'm in. So on the one hand, I was always in sort of like the gifted group of students, but on the other hand, I never really worked much at it. There were always people, I think, who had better grades and stuff, and they deserved it. They worked more at it. I didn't work at it. I didn't have to work at it.
Right.
I was always doing my own thing. I was always absorbed in my own thing. The number of times I got sent home, not sent home, I mean, I lived too far away from school to ever be sent home. I had to be bused everywhere the whole time because of the distances involved in living in an isolated place. But
sent with a note.
Yeah, sent with a note. Like, he's not paying attention. Like, I remember once in 4th grade, I got a really scathing letter sent home because the teacher was just, I don't know what she was talking about. It was really boring. So I was reading the biography of Abraham Lincoln during math class or something. Because I just couldn't be bothered with the stupid stuff she was talking about. And it was an interesting book.
Because you already knew it.
Yeah. Or it was easy to pick up.
Yeah. So were there any particular subjects that you weren't good at?
Not good at. I didn't have any subjects where like the grade lagged very far from the others. No.
Okay.
I wasn't, I don't think, a standout in anything that didn't involve anything that involved the English language. Like, I was stellar in that. And everything else was just sort of like, good.
Yeah.
Right? Not like, well, why aren't you doing better in this? I mean, I got lots of why aren't you doing better in this, but I could look at it and say, I'm doing better than virtually everybody in this little tiny school. So what's your problem?
Right. How many students?
So I can read my book.
Well, how large was your grade? How many students in the school?
From kindergarten through grade 6, there were probably like 180 students in the entire school.
Wow. So you didn't field a football team?
No, definitely not.
No. Okay. Mine wasn't much bigger than that either.
Yeah.
Where I grew
and
up.
Then the transition to 7th grade, it was a 45-minute bus ride each way from my house to get to school.
Oof.
And that's not with like, I was one of the last stops before it opened up full throttle, the bus, and like went up there. Like, it had already, it's not like it was 45 minutes because they kept picking up someone every minute or so. I was one of the last stops, and then like it was a straight shot. It was 45 minutes for me. It must have been an hour, maybe 75 minutes for some of those kids if they were at the beginning of that pickup route.
Wow.
It also meant I was coming back. I was one of the first ones to get dropped off. So that was nice. But still, that's 90 minutes a day for years and years and years and years and years, because the next school I went to wasn't really that far from the high school, wasn't that far from the middle school. So it was always 45 minutes to an hour each way. That's like, to this day, I hate commuting in all its forms.
Yeah. How did you occupy yourself? Did you think a lot about different things that you were going to be creating copy in your head, or were you thinking about,
You mean on the bus?
Yeah, on the bus.
On the bus, I would mostly read or look out the window and count anything to count. Telephone poles, houses, the painted stripes. I spent a lot of time counting painted stripes on the road.
I used to do the same thing when I was a kid. I would look at the painted stripes in the road all the time.
They're kind of mesmerizing after a while.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
No, I never needed to also, you can't really write on a school bus. I mean, it was a full school bus. There were 3 kids in every seat.
Yeah.
Right. You can't write. It's too bumpy. And then people hitting your arm and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think that's where I started. Like, you would never, ever, ever want to take a long road trip with me, ever. Because anytime my brain is not actively focused on something else, like, a conversation or reading or whatever, it's audible. It's not loud, but it's audible. If you listen for it, you will hear it. I'm workshopping language. I'll say like the same sentence or the same paragraph over and over and over again, trying different words, different speeds, different cadences. I'm not trying to do it. A lot of times I'm barely aware that it's happening.
This is not
but I'm rewriting and workshopping language all the time, slightly out loud.
So it's not like driving on a road trip with Rain Man.
I've seen that movie twice. I don't remember what Dustin Hoffman was doing in there, but it's not. I'm basically having a conversation I'm having a conversation where you can only hear my part of it,
right?
And there's an avatar that I talk to.
Oh, cool.
And I have like an impression or a feeling of what the reader, who the reader is, or what they're going through and what their context is. And I just keep saying the same sentences over and over slightly differently until I come on the right one. A lot of times it's not for any particular work project. And yet, I did so many hundreds and hundreds of those LinkedIn sessions for folks over the last couple of years where, I ask them some questions, and then while they watch me, I write brand new from scratch what their position message is going to be. That's why I can do that so fast in real time, is because I've already workshopped hundreds of thousands of variations of sentences and word clusters while I drive and walk and, wait for the kettle to boil, or wait for the coffee maker. Like it never stops.
Yeah.
So it's all in there. I just need to find the right one to give them.
It's stopless copy.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're deeply steeped in copy. Were your ads and your copy that you had for the grocery store, were they successful in bringing customers in?
Oh yeah, they were really great. They I mean, the signs, the wording, why we all said when someone like finally came to the counter, right? And it was like, understand this grocery shop was about the size of a 7-Eleven in America.
Got it.
Okay? It wasn't very big, but it had a wide variety of things, almost like a general store, grocery store kind of thing. And I mean, even down to the point of like when someone came to the counter, every other store you went to in that part of the world, and maybe everywhere, they would, the cashier would say like, "Is that it?" And then but I didn't like how that sounded, and so I talked to my dad, and we went back and forth on it, and we settled on, is this everything? Today, the people ask you like, "Did you find everything?" That's a ridiculous question in a store the size of a 7-Eleven.
Right.
But like, will this be everything? Or is this everything? Right? Everything is so much better than it.
Right.
There were like hundreds and hundreds of tiny little changes like that cumulatively made the shopping experience, I hope, better and more useful for everybody.
Yeah, I think so. So what was your first job out of college, and kind of the progression to where you are now?
What was my first job out of college? I worked the whole time I was in college.
Okay.
Like I had at least one job, and oftentimes two. Okay. The whole time I was in college, for my undergraduate.
Okay.
And then when I got out of there, I think I did some work for political campaigns. Okay. And helping them sort of with phrasing and how to say stuff and what people on the phone should say, and that, and some input, some, not much at that point, some on their speeches and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up, I worked on my own, helping. With two friends, I started a small company. Basically, It was like house call based IT support for small businesses. And we did that for a couple of years. I sold my share of that to them. I started another thing with a couple more friends. And then a year later, I sold that to them. By the way, when I say sold it, it's a very modest sums of money. Like I'm not like a serial entrepreneur making millions every time. I mean, it was very modest amounts of money.
Founder of Geek Squad.
Very modest. And then after a few years of that, I went back to, I applied and got into a private program. I think it was like a year and a half program. That was like a more advanced computer programming kind of thing. And I had to move away to go do that. Okay. And I think you had to write, sometimes I was just like snarky for stuff. Right. And you had to like write a letter about why you were qualified to be in this program. And my letter was just one sentence. I wrote the word processor that I'm typing this sentence in.
You sound like a friend of mine.
Instead of using like Microsoft Word or something, I said, I wrote this word processor that I'm now typing this sentence in. Yeah. That's it. That's my whole thing. That was my qualification.
Yeah. I had a close friend of mine who did something very similar to that. Yeah. And now he's a big CEO at another company in the tech space. And very similar. I wrote a series of games. I created this, at the time, the big DVD players were popular, and he did an architectural thing on Laserdisc and all of this stuff. And it was it's pretty cool when you can do that.
I remember someone interviewed when I was working as a software developer in Florida. There was a guy who came in and he taught, we had an opening, and he was like an older guy, older than most of us. And as part of the interview, they said, so like, have you done any thing that you worked at Microsoft? Have you worked on anything that we've ever heard of? And he said, Yeah. So I mean, back then, it was, you could easily go to a DOS window, right? We didn't even call it a command line window. It was just the DOS window in Windows, right? Windows 95 or whatever it was at the time. And he said, like, run MSD or MS-Diag. It was like the diagnostic tool that they use in Windows. And he said, like, go to like about, like help about. And like his name was there. He wrote that.
Oh, wow.
I said, that's awesome. That's awesome.
That is pretty awesome.
I've used this thing, and now I know the guy who wrote it. That's awesome.
So what was one of the most memorable jobs that you've worked on, or memorable projects that you've had?
Probably I was the project manager for some stuff that's used in the cable industry in America now that nobody really likes. Like, we figured out how to do caps, or what the industry euphemistically refers to as thresholds, on your broadband. So like when Comcast says, you get a gigabyte of X, or Charter says, you get like, whatever, 1 terabyte of bandwidth per month. Like, we figured out, we reverse engineered and then built for the cable companies how to do that. Yeah. You think it's very easy. It's actually not, because none of the cable modems and equipment stuff that were being used at the time had ever been designed with that in mind. There's a lot of like math and collection involved in sort of like retroactively figuring out how much bandwidth or broadband someone had used according to their threshold.
So it's you I can blame for my cap while I'm trying to...
You got it. Yes. Yeah. We figured out how to do that based on the existing equipment, and of course, and how to charge people.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Including how to charge people, how much to charge them, and then send that to the billing system, and it was all automated, and other things like that in the cable industry. I probably, mostly from coincidence, but I was the project manager that worked on quite a lot of that stuff. Sorry, everyone.
So you had the pause in the pause of my broadband.
There you go.
There you go.
Right. Or if you have phone service from your cable provider, depending on who it was at the time, like, we were the ones who figured out how much you should be charged for every long distance call, figuring out where the call began and terminated. Was it an international call? Did you call a landline or a mobile phone overseas? Sure. What plan were you on? What was included in your plan? And then finally, like, to tell the billing system, here are the details, and here's the summary, and what this person should be charged next month. So we worked on the voice stuff. We worked on measuring what people watched on TV, like actually measuring everything that they watched on TV, not like Nielsen, where they take a sample of a few hundred households, but literally everything everyone did, watching regular TV, not streaming, regular TV with your cable box. I wasn't the project manager who was involved in like the creation of that. I was a project manager and sort of took it, once it had been stood up, taking it to like, its next iteration. All kinds of cable industry stuff. But really the pivot point for all of it is I belong to a Toastmasters group. If you guys know what Toastmasters is,
sure.
It's like, in case you don't, it's a nonprofit, or that's been around forever. They like a club where people go to practice, or even just start becoming good or less uncomfortable at public speaking. And I was in this club in a place called High Point, North Carolina, which is part of like the greater metro area that I live in. And some of the people in the club, they were professional speakers. Like, they belonged to advanced clubs, but also like this little club I was in. And they came to me one day and they talked about a problem they had where they didn't want to. The real problem, in the workshop, we talk about like, if the person that you're trying to talk to was brushing their teeth, how would they talk about their own problem? Right. And the problem they wanted, the brushing the teeth problem was, I want to stop traveling. I want to get off the road so much.
Right.
But the way that they phrased it is, we try to do webinars and, training stuff and having, like consulting or training businesses. Most professional speakers, 99% of professional speakers, where they say like that's their main profession, 99% of them do not make $100,000 a year. I don't mean $100,000 per speech. They don't make $100,000 per year. No matter how many speeches they're doing. Right. So most of the ones, they either like are, they have a partner, a spouse that, evens out the revenue stuff, or else they have or in addition to that, they might have like a side business. They have a little consulting gig, or they have like a training business. Anyway, they were having a lot of trouble dealing with webinars because the way that they would phrase it to me is, on stage, we feed off the energy of the audience. We're making snap decisions. I told this joke 5 minutes ago that didn't land, or I told this story, but they didn't seem to like that. So I'm not going to tell this other one I would normally tell because that one didn't. They're making all these decisions. They have their set speech, but they're making small interior decisions in real time. I said, but they said in webinars, it's like we're just talking into a void. And to them, I was the technology guy, right? Because I've been in tech my whole life. And so they said, like, can you like figure out for us how to make this like better for the audiences and useful for us? And I walked away for a while, and I thought about it for a while, and I thought about it for a while. And I came back to them and I said, you don't have a technology problem. Essentially, everyone has to use the same tools anyway. It's not like there's $1 million version of PowerPoint that the very best presenters use, and that's why their stuff kicks ass. I said, basically, it's a very different medium, and it's unique to itself. It's part public speaking, it's part infomercial, it's part radio play, because a lot of people just listen to webinars instead of watching them. I said, what you have is an audience attention issue because you don't know how to structure your content for audience attention in this medium that's different from all of the other media that you're delivering your content through. And so, then they came back and said, okay, so how do we fix that? I said, damn it, I should have had that answer before I told them what the problem was. So then I went away and I spent a good amount of time figuring out how, in a digital live video kind of environment where a lot of people listen instead of talk, how business people and professional speakers and whatever could pitch and sell and inform and entertain in that kind of medium.
Cool.
And ended up with like a lot of like tips and tricks and in-depth knowledge and trial and error to show folks exactly how to do it. I actually don't like use that knowledge much anymore, but that was the pivot point to start another company in America and go, basically full blast in that while I was also working in my tech company jobs. Oh, by the way, there's a lesson there. If you remember, every website Wednesday, and I think last Thursday when we ran the big one, there's like a slide, the little movie we play, and it said, every weakness is a strength, reframe. That came from a weakness that I had. The company that I was working for at the time, the professional speakers came to me. By the way, that ended up becoming a company called Audience Team, and I had a dozen or so professional speakers in North America that they were regular monthly customers, and I would help them with lead generation, all kinds of content creation and reworking stuff. Cool. But I was under that company got started with a reframing that I had to do because I was under a very strict contract with the technology company I was working for, where they own your brain, right? You can't work a part-time job outside the company without permission from your manager.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very restrictive, right? You see this sometimes in like jobs that like have a lot of brainy people in a company. There are a lot of brainy people in that company. Sure. So like this is a big problem, right? Because I can't charge anybody without getting permission, and I don't want to let them know that I'm like
doing something else.
It's really none of their business what I do in my free time if it doesn't affect their business. And they were a software company for telcos. Like nothing I was doing on webinars is going to affect that.
No.
So then finally, like one day I'm taking a walk, I'm walking the dog, and I said, you know what? I bet every weakness is a strength if you just think about it differently. And that's immediately what I knew. And so I went to my first set of potential clients and I said, now I'm not going to charge you for the work that I'm doing. It's not because it's not great quality and I'm not worth it, because I'm definitely worth paying. But see this contract here? It says that I can't charge you yet. So until I know that this venture is going to work and like the revenue is worth the potential hassle of dealing with, my main employer. And so having to give away everything for free, it raises suspicions in most service-based businesses. But instead, I just reframed it as a strength. I said, for a time, you're going to get all of my stuff for free. And I'm not going to charge you later for it. I'll just tell you with enough warning, okay, starting on this date, if you want more stuff, I'm finally able to start charging, but I'll only charge for work from that date forward and never for anything I've ever done. And I was able to sign up a lot of really great clients really early because that story completely made sense to them. I was under a contract. I couldn't charge them yet.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I do that a lot for clients. Like, you think something's a weakness, but really you just need to reframe it. It needs its own story.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know how extensively you've traveled and stuff. Favorite place that you've gone?
I've been to, I think, 18 countries and most of these United States, like nearly all of these United States.
Yeah.
And most of Canada.
Favorite place of all?
Probably New Orleans. I haven't been there since Katrina. That's how long it's been. But New Orleans is just great. New Orleans, all of Louisiana reminds me where I grew up in Newfoundland. Newfoundland is basically Canada's version of Louisiana, right? It existed as a settled place long before the country it now belongs to. It has its own food. It has its own music. It has its own humor. It has its own dialect. Like, it has a very distinctive culture. Like, Newfoundland and Louisiana are very similar to each other, except one is an English culture and one is a French culture. But other than that, they sort of fit in the same, like, they're the same jewel in the same part of the crown in the countries that they belong to.
Is there like a fast food Popeyes equivalent in Newfoundland?
No. Well, yeah, there's Mary Brown's chicken.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah. But
shout out to Mary Brown.
I just want to be careful, though, in case you've ever only eaten at Mary Brown's and you've never eaten at Popeyes. They're not equivalent.
No, I'm just saying there is a
Popeyes is way better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, way better.
Okay.
But yeah, that's the that's the local version, shall we say.
So, favorite sandwich? Best sandwich?
Favorite sandwich?
Yeah.
I do not have a favorite sandwich.
You don't have a favorite sandwich.
Okay.
I do not have a go-to sandwich.
Which do you prefer, apples or orange?
Apples. I eat a lot of apples. I love apples.
There you go.
All my life I've eaten a lot of apples.
That is the correct answer.
Okay, then. Good to know.
Yeah, apples are good.
Phew, that was close.
And I used
I
to
had a
grow
50% chance of getting that one wrong.
Do you have any recreational activities or hobbies or anything, or is your brain just too busy to?
Yeah, it's too busy. I have, other than the only, there are two that, but I can only do one. So I like movies and the TV equivalent of movies, which is to say, not a movie that's on TV, but like a limited series or a really high quality kind of series on HBO or whatever, right? And the reason I like them, and I mean, I don't just like them, I like them. Like, I'm the guy who watches the show and then watches all the videos on YouTube about the show and watches the videos about, like, how they constructed that story, and the video about all the Easter eggs and stuff you didn't notice. Movies are and high quality TV series are one of the few things where my brain can get deep into it while I'm doing it, and so I don't have to think about other stuff. And then there's really involved video games, but I can't play them anymore. I have a leading indicator or a lagging indicator maybe around video games when I start making spreadsheets about the game and really getting into the minutia and exactly what are the ballistic characteristics of this gun versus that gun based on how it's been rolled in the menu and all. It gets too overwhelming, and it's not overwhelming. It's just I get too deep into it, and hundreds of hours will go by.
It's the rabbit hole beneath several different rabbit holes.
Over the course of a year, I once played a video game. And I had maps made, I had spreadsheets, I had all kinds of stuff. I spent 1,000 hours in 1 year just playing that one game.
Wow.
And that doesn't include all the videos I watched about the game and other people playing the game and all that other stuff. That's just playing it myself. And you know how many hours you spend because the game tells you how much time you spent in the game. It's one of the it's one of the games you can only play online. And so I was like, I can't play those anymore. I might dip into it for a long weekend, but only because it's a long weekend once a year. And then the weekend's over, so I put it away.
I mean, I thought you were going to say something like my favorite hobby is skeet shooting or something. I don't know.
No.
It's
shooting, and that's a very American thing. It's so easy and great.
Yeah,
but I enjoy target shooting and stuff, mostly for handguns, and go to a gun range, but I don't do it very often. Yeah. But I really like it, but I don't do it very often. That's an expensive hobby.
Archery or
that's a very expensive hobby, right?
Now, especially, yeah.
Yeah, when I started, a 9mm round might cost $7 or $8 cents, and now, now forget it. It's way too expensive.
It's like the cost of
so I like that, but it's too expensive. And I've done lots of things. I've done skydiving. I've done a bunch of stuff, but the movies tend to be where I land.
Right.
Also, I used to travel an awful lot.
Yeah.
So it's one of the few hobbies where, if you have movies, you just load them on your computer or your iPad or whatever, and off you go. And so it's one of the few hobbies you can do if you're traveling 3 days a week, 50 weeks a year.
Do you like traveling for recreation or like
No.
international traveling? Nothing. Okay, there you go.
No, I don't like traveling at all anymore.
Got it.
It's just kind of too much, right?
Yeah.
Although, I mean, some trips are nice, but I mean, my wife and my kids are way more into it than I am. But I think we talked sometime like last week or the week before where, I love McDonald's. By the way, John, you remember that video we did about that crazy sign at my local McDonald's that I hated so much because it was so terrible? They've changed the sign. Not because of anything you or I did, I'm sure, but the sign's been changed.
But they fixed
my daughter took a picture of it the first time. She says, "Hey, they changed the sign." And but I mean, I really like McDonald's as an example. But if I worked there 6 days a week, I probably wouldn't go there on the 7th day to eat. Yeah. Right.
Probably not. No.
So to my wife and kids, I had pre-check, I had clear, I had the airport lounges, I had like executive status on the airlines. So to them, it's like, oh, we get in line, we go in this fast security line, we go through, we sit in the lounge, we have our snacks. They're like, I don't know what you complain about.
Exactly.
So if you did it every week of the year and you were exhausted all the time, you wouldn't love it.
Or every day of the year in some cases. Yeah. You really wouldn't love it.
I would average between 120 and 140 flights a year.
Yeah.
For a really long time.
So we're at 40 minutes. So I'm gonna hit you with the last question.
Sure.
So is there a dream client that you haven't landed that you'd like to work with?
I cherish all my clients, but I don't really think in terms of a dream client. There are types of writing I haven't done yet. Okay. And those are like, a lot of those are sort of bucket list types of writing that I want to do. Like I want to do, I wouldn't be the one who like delivered it necessarily, but I one really great motivational speech. I haven't really written a lot of motivational type stuff. And so I would like to write one of those. And then someday, sort of a slim volume of a durable, useful, read it several times over your lifetime, like short book. But I haven't written that yet either.
Okay.
I thought you were going to say grocery store product labels.
There you go. Oh, if only, right? I mean, I don't even dare to dream about that.
Cereal boxes. Cereal boxes.
Yeah. But I mean, I really can't stand most of it's a joke at my local like credit union because I have to go there like a few times a month, right? They always have the screens behind the tellers, and it's always like whoever's doing their copywriting. It's just like I want to strangle them because it's like they come so close on almost every tagline and a headline, and yet they miss it by a mile, right? By the time it lands, and it's like every time I'm looking at them, I'm like saying out loud what the headline should be. Rewriting it in real time. So it should be that. It should be that. This is bad. Like, and the tellers know me by now. They just kind of put up with it. They know I'm the local weirdo who like can do all that stuff on the fly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to read most other copywriting these days.
I can imagine. Well, thanks for being such a
I'm
good
sure there are people who read my stuff and hate it. So it's
well, but we've actually been influenced. John and I were both talking the other day. We've been influenced by you. We're making things shorter and shorter. We've eliminated exclamation points. We're condensing copy. We're making everything just
no cliches, no alliteration. No. It's all lazy writing. Yeah.
Maybe a little alliteration.
Oh, a lot of alliteration. We're illiterates. We're illiterates.
I like a little alliteration.
Fair enough. It's your writing. You can do what you want. In fact, your guys are writing for yourselves. You can literally do any copywriting that you want.
Literally, of course.
Literally.
Literally.
That too.
Okay, that was fun.
That was fun.
All right.
So, thanks for letting us turn the tables on you today.
No problem. Yeah, usually I'm the guy sucking up the oxygen, talking too much and too fast. Yeah. This time I like the ones even like I don't like Website Wednesdays and yet I love website. I don't like even to the minute leading up to when we hit the button and go live on Website Wednesday. Yeah. But the entire time we do it, like I'm always amazed at how fast the time goes because I do like, being thrown in to do something in very fast thinking. It's just really not a lot in life where you have to do a lot of very fast thinking.
No.
And I spent a lot of time in slow thinking, but I like the fast thinking.
Fast thinking is good. On your feet, even though you're sitting down.
Yeah, I'm a butt. Yeah. Butt thinking.
Butt thinking.
Yeah.
But why not?
Yeah. Elbows on the table thinking. There you go.
Elbows on the table thinking.
All right. Thanks, guys. I guess. Oh, I have to take us out. I have to end this.
Yes,
So,
we're not in control. You're
right.
still
Well, today's
Yeah.
Thursday. In case you happen to be watching this live, probably not. And so it was Thursday when we recorded it, which means we're not going to be back again for 4 more days.
Yeah,
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Mondays we don't record. And so thanks very much. I hope, someone someday might enjoy watching this. And if not, I enjoy doing it. I hope you guys enjoy doing it. We'll see you again in a few days, talking about more social media